I tried them. They are awful.
Oh yeah,
Most shitty movement I ever experienced.
that's a quote. We're gonna take that quote from the podcast.
The future of music.
The future of music. The future of music.
The future of music.
The future of music.
The Future of Music podcast.
Hey there, and welcome once again to the Future of Music podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive in the future of music. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Withrow. My other brightly lit and wonderful host is over there named Jonathan Boyd. Man, Jonathan, it's always good to see you, but we have something really fun. You're obviously overseas doing some kind of insane travel, as always. But, we wanted to make sure that you didn't feel so alone. So we made sure to bring in somebody from Berlin today. And before we dive into that and start to roll things out, I want to make sure that everybody knows what to get excited about. Why did we do this? Who are we talking to? What do they have to look forward to on today's episode, man?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be an extremely interesting episode. I'm really excited to dive deep on this because I know it's going to go really, really, really deep. Specifically, we're talking to a video game developer, which I'll let you introduce here in a moment. But we're going to be talking about the rise of virtual reality. How did it actually come about? And actually the rise of virtual instruments. And I don't mean virtual instruments as in like a VST where you can, plug into your computer and you can play with a MIDI guitar or a MIDI amp or something like that. I mean actual virtual reality instruments and the new possibilities for not only gaming, which we're going to hear about, but actually playing music and learning music with these new, quote, instruments that we've never actually seen before. And of course, how the heck are they going to affect the future of gaming? And when it comes to actually learning music, are people still going to play instruments? Are they going to not play instruments? Are they going to play virtual instruments? How is that going to work? We're going to dive super deep into that stuff here in just a moment.
Nice. And, you could affect your own future by subscribing. If you're not already subscribed here, I'm always searching, man. I'm always pulling.
That's good.
I'm grasping at straws. I think I did all right on that one. But for sure, make sure if you're watching on YouTube that you subscribe and you click the alerts to see every episode. I mean, we've been busting out 2 a week, man. We just keep going just because I think we could do like 800 a week and still not catch up to all of this stuff that's happening. But we want you to make sure you're along for the journey. So even if you're listening on a podcast platform, make sure you follow. But we've said all of that. It's time to go into our guest today. So let's do it, man. All right, my friends, we obviously are joined by somebody in a mystical land here, which is wonderful. And I'm not talking about Jonathan today, all right? I'm talking about Hoshi, also Heiko. You go by both, which is fine. But we're going to say Hoshi a bunch because it's your company as well. So I want to make sure that we just ingrain it into the brains audibly so that people are just like subconsciously thinking about you and your company. But man, I looked you up. I was a creeper. I looked at all the stuff that you've done. I was in the background. I didn't even have to ask you for a bio. All right. I did the digging. Game creator, author, lecturer is really what you are pushing and what your expertise falls in. You've got over 20 years working in the video game industry at this point, which is just amazing. And we'll get into that stuff on all the changes that you've seen over that time. Massive experience in everything video game, of course, but what really makes us interested is that 3D, VR, AR side of video game design and creation and development. You're currently a lecturer for game development and game design at MDH in Berlin. And you're in Berlin. So, thanks for hopping on with us at this hour in Berlin. But again, what really piqued our interest, we're going to talk about it all. But how is this relevant to us today? And how did I find you? How did I say, man, I got to talk to this guy? It's your work specifically with that virtual theremin, the vremin. Am I saying that properly? Is that good enough? All right, good. So it was just one of those things where, John and I are really big into VR and AR, and I'm always testing out anything music related. When it comes to the VR AR space. And what y'all did was just phenomenal. And we'll make sure that we put some video demonstrations up for everybody to check out and see. And we'll make sure we link all of that as well in the show notes. But my friend, Hoshi, it is great to see you. Great to meet you. Thanks for being here. And thanks for having a chat with us, man. So let's kind of dive in. John, I know that we want to talk specifics. We want to do our typical workflow here. We want to make sure that we get some history, everything. But, let's just dive in, man. Let's go.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for this, not only because we're going to be talking about VR, AR, that, the podcast as the future of music. So obviously AR, VR has been talked about for a long time, but now it's really becoming kind of more mainstream with a lot of different games and a lot of different stuff that's coming out. But before we get to now, I'm really curious to hear how, when we say you're an author, you're a lecturer, you've been in the industry for 20 years. That's a long time to be in this industry, right? Not that many people can say that they have that long of a history in this industry. So I'd love to hear, how did that even get started? How did you even get into video games? And then what led you to get to this point where you have 20 years of experience in this industry?
Yeah, awesome question. So hi, and thank you for having me here. By the way, pronunciation of vremin, I'm not entirely sure, but I think vremin would make sense because of theremin. But to be honest, who cares in the end, right? As long as you like to play it, I think it's fine. So let's find out how the majority will pronounce it, since there is no pronunciation guide on the page, right? Maybe we should start having something like that. Might be a good idea. Might be a good idea. So how I started to get into the video game industry. Funny story. My parents thought it would be a good idea to start as working in as an accountant or something like that. And if you had the chance to see my desk back then you would have known accountant is definitely not a good idea for the kind of person I am. So my table was always very, very full of stuff and computers and cables and having ideas, doing some 3D art, doing some programming. So everything was always related to computer stuff, right? So being an accountant would have been the end of everything. I have no idea. So then I was an accountant for a month, and then luckily they kicked me. Otherwise, I would have kicked myself, I guess. And then I started to apply for jobs in the video game industry myself, because I said, you know what, even if you don't think that will work, I think it will work. And I just applied with the 3D graphics that I did in my spare time, and a few of the levels I created for, I don't know, Doom and Duke Nukem, maybe. And it worked. So I became a graphical artist in the video game industry. Started with, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a Dutch company called Davilex. They created the, what's it called in English? I think it's called A1 Racer. You know that one?
Mm-hmm.
You know that one? Okay.
Yeah.
So everyone hates it, but everyone has played it, something like that, right? And it was a cool time, and I enjoyed working very much in the company, because I hated the games, I have to admit, but I loved the team. So we had an awesome team, and it was really a nice job, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about creating graphics for low-end computers, and I think that's still important today, because with smartphone games and so on, being able to optimize stuff, so it never gets old, sort of, right? Mm-hmm. And so one thing led to the other, and I'm still there.
It's amazing. That's amazing. First of all, I don't think there's any worse game than Atari. Wasn't it E.T.? Wasn't that the one? Yeah, that was just like, no good. But yeah, man. Doom, Duke Nukem, man, you're speaking my language. Yeah,
that's
good.
the beginning.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's super interesting. So there's a couple of things that I want to dive a little bit deeper in here about. One is, well, I'll just start with this one. Why video games? What is it about video games that just made you want to continue to do it?
You mean like working in the industry or playing them?
Well, both. I mean, it's the same thing, right? You're playing all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of the same thing, right? I mean, if you want to work in the industry and you don't like video games, you will have a hard time, right? Mm-hmm. But there is also a lot of people that like playing games but will never be good at creating them, because for instance, there is a lot of people that don't like playing a lot of different games. They play one game and playing it for tens and thousands of years, looking at you, StarCraft 2 gamers, or League of Legends. I have no clue. But for me, it was always the curiosity about the next game, right? So starting one game, and then there is another awesome screenshot that you see, and you're interested. Okay, what is that item going to do? I remember back then when the Super Nintendo came out. I had the Game Boy and the NES before, and then I saw those. I think it was paintings of the items that would be in Super Mario World, and I was like, "Damn, I want to play this game. I want to see what they do." Because they were so colorful and never seen one of those items before, right? A Yoshi, what is a Yoshi? I have no clue. So this curiosity is part of why I wanted to work in this industry as well, and I think also, I mean, I had to force myself also to finish a lot of games, and I finished my 577th game right now, I think. Maybe even 507th game. So there is so much to discover, right?
Yeah,
super interesting.
that's a decent number. I had no idea it was that high, man. Yeah, that is insane.
That's amazing. You need some kind of award. Maybe we can make something on Microsoft Paint and send it to you after this.
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, we'll email you a PDF.
But the most important thing I think is you can create this stuff out of thin air, right? That's also something that is. I mean, that is something also programmers. That is something that you have to realize at some point, right? You have a blank sheet of paper. In this case, I don't know, a notepad plus empty document or something. You start typing, and in the end, you have an application. So, I mean, of course, it's a lot of work, right? It's not just 5 lines of code, and it's something interesting that everyone wants to use. But that's basically what it boils down to, right? Creating stuff out of thin air. And in the case of games, it's creating worlds out of thin air, which is sort of godlike, isn't it?
Yeah, that's super interesting to me because it's actually something that I think about a lot. And when we think about the concept of ideas, everything that we see that's man-made is an idea, just made, and it's just manifested, right? So, and ideas are things that solve problems. So right now we're talking about video games, and for the most part, video games are made for enjoyment, to consume like a movie or something like that.
They create problems.
Everything created creates new problems as well. But
sorry. The point of a game is to create problems that you have to solve, right?
Yeah, that's okay. That's another route. Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, so let's separate business and games, for example. So business aims to solve problems that already exist. So games, actually, you brought up something new there, that it actually creates problems, and that's why people want to play them, to solve those problems. So that's super interesting on its own.
Agree.
Yeah, that's a good take. I didn't think about that ever. So that's good.
That's fascinating. So another question: you have this idea of wanting to be into video games because there's this element of curiosity and discovery, that you're always discovering new things, new worlds, and new games. And you mentioned when you mentioned Mario, I remembered playing Mario 3D for the very first time. So I think when most people think of video games, and I mean just like the average person, when they think of video games, it's a 2D experience, like on a screen, right? They imagine a console, maybe some wires, and somebody playing a video game on a screen. But the moment, and this was in 64, but when I played Mario 3D for the very first time, it was like the first time that you actually had a 3D experience where you could, turn to the right and turn to the left and go all around.
You haven't played Doom before? Or Quake?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yes, you're right.
Because there was even more 3D, right? Sort of. But I agree.
Yeah. So what I meant by Mario 3D was kind of the first time that you could actually like go up and down, and not only left and right, but you could go everywhere. It's like a completely 3D game. So let's fast forward a little bit more, and now we've already mentioned the idea that the concepts of VR and AR are kind of becoming more mainstream. They're finally getting some level of mainstream adoption now, or at least, the average person is starting to hear about it, or maybe there's commercials about it or something like that. Amazon, for example, lets you like try on shoes or put furniture in your house. And Apple has similar functionality. So it's becoming more ubiquitous in daily life, and we think obviously it's only going to become more ubiquitous, and we'll get to that in a moment. But along your trajectory of getting into games and really kind of cementing yourself in the industry, where was the threshold of getting into VR and AR, that 3D moment? How did you start getting into that?
So the VR part. So there was a time, I think, in the late 90s when there were VR headsets, but you could neither afford them nor get your hands on them, right? I mean, there were a few places where you could have gone, but back then I was, I don't know, around 15 or something, and I wasn't able to get to Berlin on my own just to try VR headsets, so I never had the chance to try it, unfortunately. But I still knew they existed, and I knew what they looked like, and I wanted to try them, and I didn't have the chance. And this fascination that it never left me. And then the Oculus came, the Kickstarter Oculus, the first one. Then what was it called? Oculus Rift. Was it Rift already? I think so, right? The first one.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
So the first Oculus Rift, and I thought, oh, finally, there's something that you can. I mean, as a normal human being, you can afford and try out, right? And I did get my hands on it a little while after the Kickstarter. Someone sold me his Oculus Rift because they couldn't do anything with it. So I bought it for, I think, €100 or something. So really cheap. I got it really cheap. And it was awful because it was still fascinating because you had the 360 degrees, but basically that was it, right? You had no position tracking and always the drivers didn't work correctly, and I did get blue screens a lot, but still I could sort of feel the direction it was going, right? And then the Vive came out, and I knew that one would be awesome because finally you would be able to move your head, get the controllers, and I don't know. Do you remember the Nintendo Wii when it came out?
Oh yeah,
of course.
Do you remember seeing the commercial of playing Zelda and seeing someone using the Wiimotes and you were like, awesome, will it be like that? And then the first time I tried it in the supermarket, I was like, okay, damn, it is not anything like they promised in the adverts. So I was completely disappointed. I knew from the beginning that for me the Wii is not the console that I will like. And it was so until the end, to be honest. I hated that console because I knew it was fake. And all the family members and all the people that I knew that, almost ridiculed us for playing video games, they all had to have the V at some point. And I was like, why are you buying this one now? There's awesome video game systems, that, right? But all of them had to have it. And I didn't get it. And with the Vive, it was the first time that what Nintendo promised in the V commercial finally was there, right? Moving your arms and the virtual arms following exactly that movement. So for me, that was it. I had to have this device, and it was very expensive back then. I think it was around 900 or something like that. Not sure. So I did get one of those at some point. Used, of course. I had to get everything used because I couldn't afford the expensive one. And of course, I was fascinated. It was like holodeck in Star Trek, sort of, right? So it was exactly as it was supposed to be, and I was curious. Back then, I was teaching at the Games Academy, which was the first school in Germany that teach how to create games. I think it was founded in 2000. And back then I was also leading the project. So every semester the students had to create game projects. And I was just jealous, they why are they able to create these awesome projects and I can only, judge them? It's not fair. So I took the chance, I took the Vive, and I created the first ever virtual reality escape room, on Steam at least. And the reason I created it was because it worked. I started Unity. I had a room that I created, and it just worked. And I was curious: can I make some items that I can move from this side of the room to the other one? And it worked. So then I was curious: can I create, I don't know, a key and a lock? And it worked. Then I was curious: can I create a keypad? And so on and so on. And in the end, it was a game, and I sold it. So and some YouTubers liked it very much. So there's millions and millions of views of that game, and I was really proud, to be honest. It was a nice moment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So that's kind of your journey into getting into VR. It sounds like there's just an extreme curiosity there. You just like to explore and discover and imagine. And that actually reminds me of something that I was going to say earlier about this idea of moving from the information age now to the imagination age. So you mentioned being able to sit down with a sheet of paper, a virtual sheet of paper, right? And start coding, and whatever you can imagine is what you can create. And I think that's probably the most fascinating aspect of this whole conversation, just because for what we know from all of history, we've existed in the world, or the world that we've been given, right? But now people are developing, I mean, they have been for a while, but it's becoming more and more prevalent that they're developing whatever worlds they can imagine, and you can go in these worlds and do different things. It's really, really fascinating. And we're going to talk about in a moment of how does that segue into music? Like, where do those paths cross? But before we do that, I'd love to hear your general overview. As somebody who has been in the industry for a long time, you've seen the trajectory of how games have developed, how technology like VR and AR has developed over time, right? I'm not exactly sure how to ask this question, but how would you describe the current state of the industry when it comes to VR and AR, and as it relates to people using it every day?
Yeah, yeah. I like that question because because my answer will not be what everyone will like to hear.
Good.
So there is a few examples that I think made it awesome. Awesome examples of awesome VR experiences, but most of them are just pure garbage. They just took the game that they would have created anyway and added the VR mode to it, which is the most un-VR thing that you can do, in my personal opinion. So a lot of games, like for example, Resident Evil 7, awesome game. I love it, but I hate it in VR. You play it like you would play a PlayStation game, and motion sickness. So most of the people, if your body does not move, but you perceive movement, you will most likely get motion sickness. And that's exactly what these games do, because you play them with a gamepad. So you move using the gamepad while standing completely still, and while you see yourself running through the environment, and that will get you motion sick, or you will just fall on the ground and hit your head, which is far worse, of course, but happened.
That's interesting. That's an interesting take. It is true. I mean, even when I play, it's always like stationary boundary. Do the stationary boundary and play golf and do that. And it's like, okay, I'll walk over to the ball. Let me just do this over here. But it is interesting to think of the side of people not taking advantage of what's possible in the VR that way. That's interesting.
The fun thing is, so my game, for example, Vacate the Room, the escape room. This game really just plays in one space that is exactly the minimum space that you have to be able to start Steam VR. So it's 1.50 meters to 2 meters. But you don't teleport, you don't do anything. You have to walk with your own feet from one corner of the room, take something in your hand, and go to the other corner of the room and use it there. And I had a lot of people saying, I would love to play your game, but I'm motion sick. I get motion sickness every time I play VR. They played my game for hours, no motion sickness at all. So it is really this misuse of locomotion in this case. So the alternative, of course, is you don't use the gamepad controls. Instead, you use teleporting, right? Can you break immersion any better than this way? Because when was the last time you transported yourself this way in real life?
Daily.
So, at least
Daily,
I never did. And you get lazy, right? Why would you move your feet? You just teleport. And there's no fun in that, right? There's no immersion in that. It's just awful. That is not VR for me.
So we have an interesting kind of conundrum going on that I'm hearing that sounds like most people, meaning game developers, will create something that was maybe made for 2D application like Resident Evil or something like that, and they simply change the medium to make it VR, right? And that you still play it in the same way. And you're saying that, and I've experienced the motion sickness, but you're saying that basically what most people are doing is, again, taking the 2D application, making it a 3D version, but it doesn't necessarily translate to a good immersive 3D experience. Whereas you made an example of your game or other games like that, where you're actually walking across the room, you're actually doing all the movement. So the question is, if we want to eliminate things like teleporting and make it a fully immersive experience, wouldn't we have to expand the boundaries of the game
Ha.
to as far as you want to go? How would that work?
Yeah. I tried something in my second game using elevators and also rotating walls and stuff like that. That works pretty awesome, but some of them will also get you motion sick. So it's not the perfect solution, but I'm still on it. So I think something like a mixture of those should do. Or, I don't think teleporting is really awful as a whole if you use it less, in a less permanent way. Just think about it as, I don't know, remember something like Myst, the old one. You remember, right? You would be in a certain frame, you would solve a puzzle and then click to go to the next frame. Stuff like that would still work, wouldn't it? So you had like a space in a room where you still would be able to go from one side to the other and interact with stuff, and then you're ready and you click on the door and are on the next frame, stage, whatever. But that wouldn't break immersion that much, I would guess.
So it sounds like there's only really two possibilities, which is having an infinite boundary or a very large boundary, or having some form of whatever you're standing on or whatever environment you're in actually moves. So it feels like you're walking, but you're staying stationary. There's a movie that has a lot of stuff like that. I can't remember the name of it right now, but everybody wears VR goggles.
Ready Player One?
That's it. Yes. Yeah. So something like that, where they have like an omnidirectional treadmill that you can walk around on.
I tried them. They are awful.
Oh yeah.
Most shitty movement I ever experienced.
That's a quote. We're gonna take that quote from that podcast. That's great.
I was so disappointed because I was really looking forward to try that one. Imagine my face going from this to this. Because it was awful. It was
amazing.
Just,
but that's good though, because that means there's more opportunity to create the right solution, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked about the limiting factors of what I would call 2D, or let's call it VR'd 2D games, where they just slap something in VR. Okay, so on the music side, for as long as we know, in fact, I did some research, and about 60,000 years ago is the oldest musical instrument that people have discovered.
Which one?
The flute, the caveman flute. I don't know how to pronounce it. DGEMBE, I believe. It's I think it's in a museum in Slovakia.
Okay.
But either way, there's different dating. Some of them are around 45,000. Some of them are around 60,000.
Crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy, but it's a flute, right? So where I'm going with this is, it's a physical object that you hold and you play. You do something with it. It's an instrument, right, to play music. So with VR, we've had some examples of this in what I would call 2D, like on a screen, like a virtual piano, for example. But
awful.
Really, exactly, awful. So when people try to do things to 3D VR, we're now starting to see these games come out where people are making, quote, virtual instruments. And I don't mean virtual as in you plug in your guitar and it's a virtual amp. What I mean is an actual 3D virtual reality instrument. So people are starting to make things like this, like drums or different types of games. But first of all, have you had any experience with any of those types of games?
Not any that I like.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm going. It seems like the music games that are coming out, even if it's made just for fun, or even if it's made for actually learning music, it very much seems like that experience that you said, where you're taking something in 2D and kind of 3D-ifying it, or trying to VR-ify
it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to be honest, I think that's the reason why the theremin that I created works better because the theremin in reality you don't touch it, right?
Mhm.
It's exactly the same. You just move your hands without touching the instrument. So it's the closest one that you could build in virtual reality anyway. But the reason why I built it, just if you're curious, I wanted to buy a theremin and it was too expensive, and I just built it on a weekend for myself.
That's
So
amazing.
and and I just thought maybe someone else thinks the theremin is too expensive, and I just put it on Steam for I think 190 or something.
Yeah.
So it's just the cheapest way to get something that is very close to the original. The fun thing is I had 2 comments to reviews on the Steam page. One said, "Awesome, this feels like the original theremin," and the other
Wow.
one was, "Awful. I have no clue how a theremin feels, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't feel like this." Just both below each other. It was
Perfect.
hilarious.
Perfect. You got both sides. Well, the different theremins feel different. There was actually a while, a number of years ago, I got into theremins, and for some reason, I just really wanted to play one. It's just a cool concept, you know. It's just electromagnetic sound. It's just really, really interesting. So you made a theremin game, and you clearly have, I mean, not only your wealth of experience in the industry and all of your knowledge in the industry, you definitely have a different perspective on all of the new things coming out. Whereas somebody who is like Ryan and I, for example, we talk about this stuff maybe a little more than the average person. But for the average person buying the Nintendo Wii or buying the Oculus or something like that, everything to them is amazing. It's like, oh wow, I can do this thing in 3D. It's so cool. It's amazing. But from your perspective, it's really neat to hear, because you kind of have like the professional version of the perspective, and it's like, oh no, that's the amateur version. This is what we need to create. So before we dive deeper into the music stuff, because I really want to get deeper into that, and especially about learning music, what do you think would need to happen in order for the just general VR experience to go to something that you would deem as being like, wow, this is really cool, this is really amazing and immersive?
It can always be less cluttered, right? So the headsets are very cluttered and also very complicated to set up. I mean, it's better now, turning the Quest on and putting it on the head with hand tracking. So that is the best that there is right now, right? Just getting it working out of the box without controllers, without setting up any lighthouses as you had for the Vive. So that is fine for now, right? And also getting the connection to PC with Wi-Fi or with one USB-C cable, I think that's fine. So of course it can still be less cluttered. It could still be less heavy, but I think it's doable, isn't it? So we're there. We're at the point where it's not too uncomfortable, right? So what more could we ask for? I'm not sure. So of course haptic feedback is missing, right? So
Yeah.
and it will be a very hard one to achieve.
Mhm.
But right now I've been working with a company called Sync Reality. Greetings to my colleagues, and they've done an awesome job with syncing the real world with virtual reality. So it's not haptic feedback like a glove that holds you back, but you scan your room, you scan the tables, you scan the walls, and then the virtual world gets created where these objects are. And that works pretty fine, I have to admit. So just imagine an escape room where there's a button on a stone table in a temple or something, and you press the button and you feel the real table. Of course, the real table is made of wood, but you will not notice the difference that much. But you notice that you touch something and there is something, and that is interesting. And also the game will look different each time you play it in a different space.
So talking about the Oculus Quest, in terms of a general everyday, everybody commercial solution, sounds like you're saying it's pretty good for now. What's your take on the Apple Vision Pro?
There is not so much new stuff there, is there? I mean, what is new? Because I mean, it was there before on a few headsets that were they were a little bit more expensive. I agree. Oh, I'm not sure anymore if they are now more expensive. Might be cheaper now as well. But I mean, the XR component was there before. I mean, even the Quest Pro has color pass through. They even have foot tracking, I think. Never tried it, so I only believe what I tried, unfortunately. But at least they promised they will have it. So eye tracking has been there before. I don't know what is there.
Hmm.
What is there to be really looking forward to?
Interesting. So, do you think? I mean, just hearing you go through all of these different headsets that have these components. I mean, I think one of the quotes I hear all the time is like, Apple isn't the first to do anything, but they try to be the best at it at some point. They try to come out and be like, see, we're the best one, though.
Yeah,
We're not the
maybe.
first, but we're the best. So, do you feel like this is a situation of them sitting back for quite a few years and trying to say, like, I like that and what that headset performs. This one over here, I like that one piece that it does. And they kind of like combined all of these elements over the years to be like, let's make what the best parts of all headsets into one headset. And I think also it brings us into this other conversation too, which is most of the headsets now are all focused around this gaming element, right? Which is great. We like it. But I feel like with Apple Vision Pro coming around, it feels like they're directing 50-50, like a 50% split. Like games, great. You could do that. But let's make it life. Like, let's actually break that barrier of like, you want to work from an office at the beach, you use our headset. It really seems like it's very much like productivity and work focused in using the VR, AR kind of element. But it's an interesting take to hear that it existed. All this stuff existed. So yeah, what do you think? What do you think?
So my guesses. Let me say my guesses are the following. So first of all, you know how it is after half an hour of wearing a headset, any headset, right? Even the Oculus Quest, you just want to get out at some point. So imagine buying a $3,500 headset that you just want to get out of after half an hour. And I cannot imagine how many people will be able to afford that, honestly. And I mean, it was even hard now to get your target audience in VR with headsets. I mean, what does the Quest cost? The Quest costs 350-ish.
Yeah.
So it's a tenth of that. And still you don't have enough target audience, at least not for indie developers. Of course, if you can afford, if you can afford advertising, then you get your money out of it. But believe me, as an indie developer who cannot afford much advertising, you don't sell that much. And how will it be with a headset that no one can afford? I have no clue.
Yeah, interesting. It's funny that you mentioned that. I just played VR again this past weekend with my brother-in-law, and we typically just hang out, play some mini golf or something together. And I remember taking the headset off after an hour and looking at my face and being like, how am I this sweaty? Like, how am I? My face is just drenched in sweat, like it's in my beard. My face, Krista, my wife, my wonderful wife, I sent her a picture of it to show her, like, look how sweaty I am. But she was like, when did you get a sunburn? And I was like, oh,
exactly. That's it.
Not
right
a sunburn. It's the VR.
The healthy VR sunburn. Yeah, you're right. So I always call it face sauna. So
face sauna, that's good.
Yeah, and you get it for free with the VR headset, right? It's a bonus.
Yeah, I feel like you could just market that as a game, man.
Yeah.
Good.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Just a picture in the whole game. But yeah, it is. It's so funny. I came into this conversation. We've got more to talk about, I'm sure, but I came into this conversation being like, let's talk about all the cool, good things about VR, AR, and what's happening. And there will be conversations about that, but it's so intriguing to me to hear like the other side and then start to be like, I kind of agree, actually. Now that you're mentioning this stuff, I'm like, it does suck to be like covered in sweat and just like holding this. I had to get a separate like strap for my head because it just kept like falling off, you have to like make do and figure things out rather than it being optimal and perfect. I'm like, why can't they put fans in this thing? What are they doing? But yeah,
they do put fans in it. If you're a VR fan, you have to have a headset, right? So, and the thing is, as much as I was really impressed by VR, I still like this much more. Can you see it? So, playing in the train with something like the Switch or the Steam Deck. So, I still don't think that VR will end gaming as we know it in any way. It will just add something different.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I think that's a good segue, John. Let's start talking about that. Let's start diving in.
I can see that. So we're now talking basically about opening new doors, but the door remains open. So it's just kind of like listening to music. Records haven't gone away. CDs haven't gone away. Tapes haven't gone away. People still have all the stuff. It's just that there's a new pond basically for a different fish to go swim in. And it kind of seems like, with your insights on this, it almost seems like the world in general is kind of mesmerized by the idea of VR and the Apple Vision Pro, this new thing. Everything's new. It's going to be, new, just completely new thing. They call it, Apple calls it spatial computing, right? But
Mhm.
you're really shining light on the reality, ironically, the actual reality of virtual reality, which is it's very sobering, but it makes total sense. And again, when we look at adoption and practicality, and you guys just talking about having the face sauna, I mean, it's true. So now let's actually segue into the music stuff. So you're a musician yourself, right?
Hobby musician, I would say.
So basically, yes.
I
Do
mean,
you play
I sold music with my games, so that makes me a professional, doesn't it?
that? Yes, a
Damn.
professional musician. Look at that. So what instruments would you say that you play?
um, so I started with piano,
Mhm.
keyboard, synthesizer, but I really love to play guitar, especially because you can take it anywhere and
Yeah.
just use it. Try that with the piano. It's hard to do, right? Getting it on a campfire. Um, but yeah, I like playing guitar, especially because you can sing to it. I have
Mhm.
to admit, I hate everything that has to do with writing notes or reading notes. So I
Sure.
learned that back then, but I have no clue about them anymore because I tend to just play what I hear.
Yeah, 100%. I think at the end of the day, that's pretty much what all great musicians do, at least modern musicians. So maybe, I mean, honestly, I would say all musicians, because after you've written a piece, even if you're Beethoven, for example, and
Mm.
you write the piece, I don't think you're sitting there reading it and regurgitating it. You're playing it from within you. So let's talk about guitar and piano are two perfect examples. So this goes back to the flute idea that I talked about. So for all of history, we've had this thing that we call an instrument, a physical object that we have to interact with, unless we're singing. But you still have a voice box, and you still have vocal cords that you have to learn how to change and practice and exercise and all that. But let's just take piano and guitar for example. So anybody who wants to learn music, there's what I consider two main big roadblocks or obstacles that you have to overcome in order to actually play music. One of those things is the instrument itself, like physically trying to navigate the guitar or the piano. And I mean, every single guitar player I've ever talked to or heard of, they had a pretty tough time with it in the beginning. It's always really hard. Your fingers aren't made to do that. What was your experience like?
Same, of course, but
Yeah,
the question is, isn't that the fun thing? I mean, would you try to get better if it was? I mean, if you were just able to pick it up and it would work, would that be fun? I don't think so. I think
sure.
that's the nice part. So you see the instrument and you think, damn, I wish I would be able to play it. So you start
Mhm.
practicing, don't you?
That's one. I think some people see it that way, yeah. But for the majority, so let's say the majority of people don't play instruments. So if we want to
Mm.
talk about some statistics, some studies by Fender, there's some other studies. I can't think of the name right now. They're one of the big companies that does statistics. But anyway, um, basically, around 10% of the population plays an instrument. Gallup
That's a
poll is what I
shame.
was. It's a
That's a
shame,
shame.
exactly. So I was talking about Gallup polls. So according to one of the latest Gallup polls that I saw, about 82% of adults wish they could play music.
How much percent?
82%.
Oh, okay.
So
Mm.
10% can play, 82% wish they could play, right? So
Mm.
Fender in 2020, I believe it was, around the time of the pandemic, Fender did a study where they were obviously they're trying to figure out how to sell more guitars. But
Yeah,
what
of
they
course.
what they found was anybody who picks up a guitar, 9 out of 10, so only 10% continue. After 12 months, 90% of people quit and never pick it up again.
Okay.
So the reason I bring up this idea of it being physically hard is because for some people like yourself, I mean, let's just be honest, you're a very intellectual guy. like challenges, and you were talking about games and solving the problems of the games. Some people are like that. Most people aren't like that. Most people wish they could just do the thing. So let's say guitar, for example, or piano, but let's just talk about guitar. So when I'm picking up the guitar, if I'm the average person, I'm wrestling with getting my fingers to cooperate. I'm hitting the wrong notes. It's just so freaking frustrating. I just want to smash the guitar, you know? And if 90% of the people are quitting, well, they're not actually getting to the point that they wanted to get to, which is being able to play music and express themselves and have fun with it. You see what I'm saying?
There's also a lot of people that want to be famous, right? But they don't want to do what it takes to be famous, or want to be an actor, but don't want to learn how to act. They just want to be an actor. So that might be a problem that is far broader than just the musical aspect of it, right? Yeah, not sure. Of course, I would love to be able to write like Stephen King does,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to practice. So, and with the rise, and that's the next topic, right? With the rise
Yeah.
of AI, now everyone is capable to just ask the ChatGPT to write it for you. That's it. So finally, there's a solution. Oh, by the way, right before this show, I asked ChatGPT to write me an unique, awesome melody, and the interesting part of it is, I asked ChatGPT to write me a MIDI file, and ChatGPT, of course, is not able to create MIDI files, but it is able to create a Python script that writes a MIDI file. So I now have a Python file that I executed that got me a MIDI file, and the melody is awful. I can send it to you if you like.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I'll
We
put
can
it in.
the show notes. Yeah.
This is a good move, like a good conversation, because I think I see where you're going here, John, and I think you just added to it a bit there, Hoshi. So, you know,
Okay,
good
good to know.
Yeah. So basically, okay. So let's look at the popularity of games like Rock Band and what was the other one? Guitar Hero.
Yep.
Just completely blew
And
it. Why
Beat
do you
Saber.
think that? Why? Yeah, Beat Saber too. Why do you think those are so popular?
Oh, I think that is also part of the I want to be on the stage and perform thing, isn't it? I want to be the musician that performs the awesome music. I think that is it. I have no clue, to be honest, because I hate those games.
I think that's part of it for some people. And, when we are talking about what it is that people want. So in our world, of teaching guitar, we have about 1 million people or so in our community that we've seen come through and that we've helped them, learn guitar in some capacity. And for the most part, sure, there is a small slice of people who want to be famous or want to play on stage and go on tour and things like that. It's a small slice, though. Most people just want to play for their own enjoyment. Most people want to.
That's good to know.
Exactly. Yeah. But most people want to maybe relax after a long day at work, maybe play at a party with some friends, I mean, sit
Okay.
around a campfire, play something like that. So where I was going with all of this is that historically, if at least as long as guitars have been around, but we can assume it's been similar for the length of time that instruments have been around, which as far as we know is about 60,000 years. So caveman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this same challenge has existed this whole time, which is humans have to interact with a physical object and learn the mechanics of how the heck do I navigate this thing, and also how does music work, so that then they can play and then they can join in on the fun or play songs or express themselves or improvise or whatever it is. But as the Fender statistics says, that 90% of people who ever try don't ever get to that point. So where I'm going with all of this is my general question. The whole theme of everything that we've been talking about new technology, gaming technology to an extent, but just the space of VR and AR. How do you see that impacting people's ability to actually learn the language of music and be able to play music?
Not sure about that, to be honest, because for me, the most important part is listening to a lot of music, a lot of different music, and concentrate on different parts of the music, right? How do the drums work? How do the bass work? So even though I'm really awful on most of the instruments, I'm still able to get the basics out of them without having ever had training on the drums. For example, I can still do a breakbeat on the drums after 4 tries or something, because I know how a breakbeat in principle works. Not sure if you can just inject the knowledge into people. especially if they are not interested in putting work in there. The interesting part is I have the same I don't want to say problem. I have the same challenge with a lot of students. So sometimes students sit there and say, so I'm paying for the school. After the session is over, I want the knowledge to be in my head.
Mhm.
So can you please explain it to me in a way that I will understand? And the only thing I can answer is no, I'm sorry, because I have no clue what you understand and what you don't understand. But you can ask me as long as you want. No, I'm not going to ask you because, I'm paying money.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, but, that's not how it works. It is work. Learning is work. And you will never learn anything if you're not motivated and willing to put the work into it. That's first of all, it's of course my opinion, but it's also my experience from teaching for 10 years. So those that work hard will learn.
It's a good take. I mean, I can appreciate I can appreciate the take. Absolutely. I would say that I think a better way of framing kind of where we're wondering, we're not even like this is what's going to happen. We just like are always wondering like, is that possible? Is right now when we think about music, learning an instrument, all that stuff, it is hard work. You have an actual instrument. You got to figure out, listen to music, listen to chord progressions, do all this stuff. And, if you go really far into the professional side, you're learning scales, notes, composing, all of this stuff. But when we think about it, the way we're thinking about it right now, we're thinking about it as it's been. So I guess a good question to ask to kind of reframe is, do you think that with the world of gaming, VR, AR, where we're going, is there a possibility in the future where that construct is kind of like pushed away and there's more of an environment that's not specific to a guitar being in VR, right? Maybe it's somebody going over to, I don't know, a circle filled with colors that they're moving through and they're producing sounds and tones. And we're subconsciously, in a way, teaching them the language of music without them even knowing. So, in other words, can we build a game or some kind of experience for people that they're going through that's a simple new type of instrument that's not even anything they typically look at, that we can manipulate and go through? And at the end of them playing it for a week, what do you know? They don't even realize they just thought about chord harmony by doing something. It was just something that was built in and gamified in a way for them to be learning. I think that's really the big question.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There's no question about it. I mean, there is already some games that do that, right? There's some games that have musical mechanics in them without you thinking about learning to play an instrument or learning notes or something. Of course, there is, and it will also work to some degree. The only example that I could just right now think about is my experience with. Are you familiar with Duolingo?
Of course,
language learning. So it is awesome and it is super fast. I learned to talk Swedish in a few weeks, but nothing is. So I lost everything. So everything that I learned in Duolingo is gone because it was too easy, and I never used it. So I think that is also something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's, again, it's one of those kind of older constructs. I understand it's like programmed to be kind of this language learning, and they have their methods and algorithms behind it of how many times something comes back into the play so that you don't forget. But same issue with my wife, who went to school for Spanish and has a degree, and not going to Mexico for a year to see our friends, gone. Yeah. She's back to like level 201 maybe in her Spanish. It's just like not being able to use it. So it's funny to hear this example of the typical college process of learning and going through and doing it. And then this new thing comes out that everybody loves. Duolingo is great, but it all gives you the same result, right? At the end of the day, which is if you're not using it, it's not like it's actually programmed your brain and fixed you in that way and changed that process. So that's an interesting take, and it is an interesting question of, does that same feeling of I didn't use it, so I forgot it, exist in a world of trying to teach new language of music?
Unless it's principles, of course, right? Because principles once understood, I think they tend to stick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I like much more than teaching stuff to learn by heart. So understanding principles, because specifically, I'm also teaching how to program, right? So programming languages, and also in my experience, if you just understand the principles, you will not forget them this easily because they will stay the same in every programming language. But if you start to try to learn stuff by heart, then it will be gone after a while, especially if you don't use it.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and especially about you principles, and that's what I would just lump into understanding. When you just understand the mechanics behind why something works or how it works, as you say, the principles behind it, then obviously it sticks because well, you can use it. That's one thing, but also it's just it's more intuitive because it becomes part of your worldview when you understand the principles. So let's imagine that we did create some kind of a game that teaches people the principles of music, kind of like Duolingo, but without them even knowing that there's nothing about notes or harmony or chords or anything like that, right? They're just playing this game and they're intuitively learning this language. I would argue that music inherently has a different utility than something like Spanish or programming or something like that. The language of, let's say, Spanish or Italian or whatever it is, or programming, seems to be a means to a different end. People play music most of the times just for the sake of doing it, just for the sake of expressing themselves, just for the sake of playing for their own enjoyment, like we talked about a moment ago. So if you, let's say, learn Spanish, Ryan, you said your wife learned Spanish, and if you use it, it's because you have to, and you're communicating with people. So, you practice it and you use it. But if you don't practice it, you don't need to keep using it because you have a different language that you can communicate with. But music is the only language that is like music. It's not a spoken language. It's emotional and an oral language. And we listen to music just for the sheer enjoyment of the feeling that we get from it. We play music for the sheer enjoyment of the feeling that we get from it. So if we think about in general, why do musicians play music? At the end of the day, it's because of what it makes them feel, and they're always going to keep doing it because they want to keep feeling the same thing. So I would argue that if somebody has the opportunity, those 90% of people out there who wish, 80% of people who wish they could play music, 90% of people who quit and don't believe they can actually play music and go through their whole lives without actually doing it, I would argue that if they had an opportunity, an easier way to learn music, right, the mechanics, the principles of music, and they had this outlet to express themselves by doing that, I don't think they would ever stop wanting to do that. It's just a thing to get a good feeling from day after day after day after day, like therapy.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super interesting, man. And I think that we also come in a perspective that's very different than those 90% of people that quit, right? A lot of us, including you, Hoshi, come from this area of being a little bit of a higher level at this point, just because we've put in so much work, and I thought I was going to be famous, but it didn't work out. But anyway, I worked so hard at it, and a lot of people aren't there. Right. So it's hard for us, I think, and my brain, who's played for 20 plus years now, to like break apart from that brain and think about, but what if I didn't have that like ingrained in me, and I didn't play as much as I did, and I didn't learn as much as I did? And where would I be now? Would I be interested in a world of no physical instrument, just expressing myself and going through? But at the end of the day, why did I start playing guitar? It's because of the expression. And there are times where I think we all know when we're playing VR and even just a game and you have music in the background that you've selected or something, there's a point in that experience that it's immersive still. And there have been times where my wife is like, "Why are you dancing like in the living room playing golf on the VR?" And I'm like, "I am." And she's like, "Yes, it's awkward." But it's, to be honest, like you kind of forget and you kind of like let that emotion come in, and you're able to kind of like let go and do that. So I think on both sides, I think there's a lot of work that needs done to make sure that it feels that level of immersive, so to speak, for people. And then on the side of the psychological programming, in a way, right, that is able to happen with the language of music, so that at the end of the day, when they are listening to songs a year after playing a game every day, they're like, I kind of recognize what they're doing. That's insane to me. How can I tell that? So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I do agree. I think that if you make it something that brings people into that expression and like that emotion and this VR AR space, I could see why they'd come back for that same, like, I was dancing and I didn't worry about my schedule tomorrow at all in the process, right? That moment that you're like, the calendar doesn't exist. Let's have fun. I could see that. Absolutely. So good. John, let me ask you to kind of lead us in like our last big questions. Let's just kind of
Yeah.
go to like the big stuff. Let's just dive in.
Sure, yeah. We went super deep on the music side there. So really good to hear your thoughts, Hoshi, on that. And again, it's a little bit of a different take, right? It's a different viewpoint than what's common or what we've talked to a lot of people about. So that's really interesting. But Ryan, before I go to you for our closing thoughts, I really have one last question for you, Hoshi, which is, if you imagine, we've talked about kind of the state of VR, the state of AR as it is right now, and how we got here. But if you can look out over the next 5 to 10 years, and it could be completely different from 5 years to 10 years, but what do you see? What do you see being different in the future? What do you see being different in terms of what's being developed, and what do you think will still be the same in terms of just the space of VR and people using it?
Oof, that's really tough. So hopefully, the VR experiences use what VR can really bring to the table, instead of just what I talked about, right? Just creating mods of game principles that are already there and do not even work in VR, right? So there still will be a lot of games that should be played on a screen or on a mobile device, which also has a screen, of course. As it looks right now, I don't see too much change in a direction that isn't there yet right now. So hopefully there will be something new, but most of the things that I've seen in the last, I don't know, months is the same stuff over and over, and it's even less immersive than the stuff that I've seen before. So might be that the virtual reality hype is not as hyped anymore as it was a few years ago. But it might start to live again. Who knows? So let's hopefully let's concentrate on exactly what you were proposing, to not use it for just gaming, but to teach or to create immersive experiences that help understand stuff that is, for example, I mean, the main difference between doing something on a screen and doing it in virtual reality is that you are part of the room now, right? On a screen, it isn't that much. One of the examples that I can remember is playing horror games on VR. So playing it on a screen, to be honest, nothing to write home about, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure you also played some Silent Hills or some Resident
Sure,
Evils
yeah.
or whatever. Have you tried it on VR? Because it's different. I wasn't
I tried
able.
Resident Evil. It's just clunky. It's a little clunky.
Yeah. But also it's strange, right? Having someone cutting you with a knife in the head or something. That is not something I want to experience in this kind of environment. So it is a difference. So obviously, being in the space and VR is the closest thing to really being in that space. Maybe might open some other possibilities. Just think about different dimensions. For example, fourth dimension. You cannot experience the fourth dimension because there is no access that we can access. Do I make sense?
Yep.
So we already used up all the angles that we can to get the 3 dimensions into the space that we live in. But in VR, it might be different, right? I mean, with AR, we might be able to use a fourth geometrical dimension, and there is already an application that does that. It's called 4D Tools, I think. It's from a developer that also creates a puzzle game that is called Miegakure. which also plays in 4 geometrical dimensions.
Hmm.
And if virtual reality or video games would be able to make us interact with the dimension that we cannot usually interact, and thus start to understand it even more, that might even, I mean, that is awesome, isn't it? It might even get us to a new layer of understanding things. Who knows? New generation of human beings.
Yeah, that's
Love it.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
super
like that
fascinating.
you saved that thought in your back pocket for us the whole time because it's incredible. Yeah, that's a really good perspective, man.
Yeah, one of the reasons I like this conversation so much is because what you just said is actually some of the things that I think about stuff like that on a daily basis. So it's just really cool to be able to talk to you about, having the experience that you have and hearing your perspective on all this is really, really neat. So I said that was the last question. I actually have one more. I lied.
Damn.
So before I go to Ryan, what would you say, Hoshi, is your personal goals for, let's say, 3 to 5 years? What are you personally trying to get to? What would you love to see?
I would love to see me staying happy
Yeah. What does that look like?
like this.
What does it look like in terms of your daily life?
You know, doing stuff that makes you feel accomplished. To be honest, I've got already most of that done for myself, because teaching others how to create video games is a job that is awesome.
That is
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as long as you are appreciated for what you can teach others, then everything is fine. Because that's, what more could you want?
That's perfect. That's the perfect ending. We should add that quote as well to a T-shirt and mail it to everybody. Just kidding, but we will put it in the show notes. So, Ryan, I'll go over to you. We talked about a ton of stuff, a lot of crazy
Yes.
stuff today. I'd love to hear just general closing thoughts, big takeaways from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. I think we talked about I said it before. I went into this conversation thinking that we were just gonna maybe talk about how absolutely incredible everything VR AR is today, and it's just gonna be the next thing. I was proven wrong, which is a good thing. I should be every now and then. And it wasn't one of those conversations though where I was like, nah, no, that's not true. No, Hoshi, you had the knack of making me and John go, oh, I guess I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of it that way. I did get really sweaty. But yeah, all of those things. So I think for me, it's just been so interesting to be on the side of where we're at, where we view AR as users and VR as users and musicians as well. I've never had the perspective available that you have, so it's really enlightening, I guess, to see, and eye opening, absolutely, to see that side of the world and how it works. And I wrote down one of my favorite quotes that, John, you said. It's the actual reality of virtual reality.
Yeah,
That's going to be our
that
show
has to be the
title,
title.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just incredible for me to be here and sit here and have the chat. So I think that you're going to help a lot of people understand where it came from, where you feel it's going, how to get into it. I guess the last question I would have before I do a full close here is, if people are sitting there listening right now or watching, and they've considered this idea of playing games with things like VR, AR, what would you recommend for like their first experience? Like, you've seen it, you've done a bunch, you've been a part of a bunch of games, you've played a bunch of games. In your mind, if somebody's like, I'm going to try this thing, I got to try this thing, what do you recommend for like first game, first experience? What do you think?
Oh, damn. Um, there's just so many. It really depends on the person, I would say. Yeah, well, of course, what I always like to show is the escape room, because there's everything in there that makes virtual reality. But there's a lot of others. For example, are you familiar with the Batman game, the
I
Batman
don't think
VR
I am.
experience?
No.
that one is really nice because it starts with you dressing up like Batman, which is an awesome experience. So I would highly recommend to try that one.
Yeah, I think that that's good enough. I think we had to. I honestly, I think it's also opening the side of there's so many opportunities. I think my
Yeah,
first one was it was because of John and our friendship that I was like, all right, I should try this thing. I honestly think my first one was just Golf Plus. That was it. I
yeah.
was like, let
So
me see
something
how.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
something like that might make sense, right? Because you have the so you're not completely overwhelmed by gameplay, right? You have
Mhm.
time to enjoy the scenery, and I think that's important for the first experience, right? That you have time to also enjoy the scenery and get used to this unique point of view that you never had before.
yeah, yeah. I think that that's a really good piece because when I take that, I remember the first time taking the headset off after playing for a few hours. There's almost like a euphoria that happens after that point where
Yeah.
I almost wanted to like interact with things in the room that you can't. I compare it to driving a stick shift and doing that for like a week and then going back to an automatic car and being like, oh, I better not touch that thing. Like I better that's that I should not mess with this gear shifter at all right now as I'm driving. It's just it becomes natural sometimes to do it. So anyway, Matt, it's been super amazing. We'll make sure that we put that melody in here as well because I'm interested in that. So send that to me. I'll make sure that I reach out to you for that. But also, people can check you out in multiple areas here. All right, I'm going to make sure they're linked in the show notes. But the main one that we talked about today is obviously your VR theremin game, and also I believe the escape room is in there as well. It's just Hoshi.games, right? Look at that. It's so easy. No W's needed. No .coms needed. We're good to go. Hoshi.games, my friend. So check that out. Check out, I have your music down there as well, and your YouTube channel so that people can dig in and enjoy. But, my friend, it's been amazing. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate having you. And yeah, we're excited to see where VR, AR goes in the world. So let's stay in touch. All right, because I think you're going to make the next musical big focus game now after this conversation. I think that's where we're headed. But John, anything you want to say before we close out?
No, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to come on. You know, it's not every day that we get to talk to somebody like yourself, so it's really awesome and interesting diving into these super deep wormholes on some of the stuff that we talked about. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I had fun.
And I'll see you in the fourth dimension, I guess, as we go through. But it'll be great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for listening to the Future of Music podcast.